Hello, Team Minot. I'm Mr. J, your Community Support Coordinator and moderator for the You Matter Roundtable, also known as Ask the Helping Agencies. This is our weekly podcast where our experts answer your questions and discuss topics to help our community members navigate some of the challenges that they may face in regards to their spiritual, social, mental, and physical well-being. I have some subject matter experts with me today. Let's go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Alicia.
My name is Alicia Thompson. I work over at the Airmen and Family Readiness Center. I am your EFMP Family Support Coordinator, but I also work in the readiness program to help make sure that our members are returning and getting the support that they need.
Amanda, if you could introduce yourself, please.
I am Amanda Tavato. I'm a key spouse with the 5th Maintenance Squadron.
Awesome.
I am Shelley Carbo, and I'm an intervention specialist in family advocacy.
And I am J.R. Harris. I am the wing chaplain here at Minot Air Force Base.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ashley Kilgore. I'm a psychologist here in the mental health clinic, and my job is to help you all thrive.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here this morning. So today we'd like to focus on reunion and reintegration. Our mission requires that airmen spend sometimes significant time away from their families. Returning home and reuniting with loved ones, spouses, significant other, children, even pets, is something that most airmen and families look forward to at the end of a deployment, whether that deployment was weeks, months, or even years. There are things to be aware of and look out for, though, that can make that reunion, reintegration difficult. Today, we'll be discussing some of those things to look out for, some strategies to overcome them, and resources available in the event that you realize you need some help. So first, let's talk about some of the difficulties that airmen and families might experience after that initial honeymoon phase. Chaplain Harris, can you start this part of our conversation?
Sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity, John. So a bit about my story. My wife and I were mill to mill for many years, and in 2011, she deployed to Iraq and came home. And so I was the military spouse, receiving her back from a deployment. And then in 2013 and 2014, I deployed to Afghanistan, and then I came back as the military member. So I've been on both sides of that personally, and then I've helped a lot of couples and families professionally as a chaplain. And I think what's really important to understand is the power of routine and the power of habit. I think it was Aristotle who said, "We are what we do repeatedly." And as we know from deploying, we call it Groundhog Day because every day is the same. It doesn't really matter what day of the week it is. And that can create powerful routines and habits, which actually help us get through the rigor of a deployment. But when we come home, we're stepping back into a world that functions very differently. Our family has had to learn how to function differently without us being present from their daily routines and how they manage life. And so it's really important, I think, to understand the power of that and not to seek to change things too quickly, but also see in that an opportunity to establish new things. With a change of routine and habit, perhaps there's some opportunity to grow spiritually. Maybe there's some things that we were doing downrange, or things that our family was doing here stateside during our time away that we can now incorporate to make us more whole and more balanced spiritually, but also mentally, physically, and socially. So knowing that, bottom line, knowing that routine is powerful, and not to kind of try to come in and blow up the routine too quickly, but to allow that transition to be gentle and to be slow. I think that's really important.
Excellent, excellent. I love the focus on routine. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that? Amanda, as somebody who's been through this process, can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the pitfalls or difficulties that you encountered with your spouse returning from deployment?
Sure. My husband returned, he was in Guam and he returned last summer, so last July. A lot of it was when we're so, like we were talking about the honeymoon phase, we're so excited to have them back, and they're so excited to be back. But it's also, I think it's also rough for the military member. I'm sure everybody here can attune to that. But when I would ask my husband, like, hey, what do you need from me? Where are you at? And he would explain it to me as like, he was going from an environment where he was moving at like 300 miles an hour, and everything's now been halted to now he's going 25 miles an hour. So it was an adjustment for him to kind of slow down and just return back to normal life. So for me, it was just kind of giving him that grace and giving him that patience of like, you can sleep, it's okay, and like, you can take a nap, and we don't have to go to dinner all the time, and we don't have to go visit family right away, and those types of things to just help him return to normal life.
Right on. I love the idea of grace and patience, and you know, I don't know that it's any more difficult for the service member than it is for the family, you know, because you've developed new routines over the time that they were gone, and now they're back in the picture and they want to play along, and you got to find a spot for them where maybe there wasn't one before. So I appreciate that insight and input. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Okay, Captain Kilgore, would you like to add anything to this part of our topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Many years ago, I did my doctoral dissertation on reintegration and the gender differences between males and females when we deploy and separate from the family. So I think the most important thing to remember is that our experiences change us, and that's absolutely okay. Whether we're just tripping out to the field or we're going on a long deployment, that we can come back a little different, that the family can change, that pets, friends, you know, our environment can change, and we have to be flexible when we come back. That being said, the people that have the best outcomes and reintegrate or reunify in the best way are the ones that really do a good kind of pre-flight checklist. So while they're gone or before they leave, they kind of identify what are the expectations when they come home. Are they expected to take on the same roles? Are the roles going to be different? So they really kind of work out what may happen when they get home. And those are the folks that have an easier transition. And I think in addition to that, knowing what type of communicator you are is really important, because oftentimes when folks come home, whether it's short or long, their partner or their friends or their family might have a lot of questions, or might be concerned that they're not emotional enough, or they're not talking enough. And so knowing if you're really a rapport or a report communicator. So rapport is somebody that's emotional, that wants to talk, that maybe needs to cry, that has a lot of free-flowing emotions they want to get out about their experiences. And then a report is somebody that just is going to give a few bullet points and they're good to go. And so kind of knowing what type of communicator and letting the folks in your life know what type of communicator you are, so they can identify that you're really getting what you need when you come home.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about, and I heard grace in what you were saying, right? Like understanding the type of communicator that you're dealing with, and how important that is. Is it somebody who's looking for connection, or somebody who's looking to just give information? Because we're all wired a little bit differently. And I love the idea of the pre-flight checklist, right? Like let's have this conversation before we actually get there. And to me, that speaks volumes to me. And just to use a sports analogy, you wouldn't send a football team out onto the field if they hadn't practiced and walked through and run through their plays.
Yep.
This is a perfect example of it's not okay to go in cold. Maybe take some time to start talking about those things before the reunion actually occurs.
Absolutely.
Alicia, would you like to add anything to this conversation?
Well, you know, I always have something to say. So being in the opposite side of Amanda's situation, where I live in a missile field household, and it can be very difficult every couple of days or every couple of weeks having that change. And it's normal to feel frustrated, because the members coming back after working for however long they've been out there, and then I've been here by myself handling this by myself, and then he just wants to jump in and do all these things, and it's like, I got it handled. So it's kind of like both sides of the fence. You have to understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, can be really, really frustrating. So we at the Airmen and Family have noticed that, and notice that this area of our population is missed. Those spouses don't necessarily get that briefing, that reintegration process information from us. So we've actually created a briefing for them.
Awesome.
And we'll be rolling that out next week. Details to come. But we have 4 scheduled for next week at different times. So each spouse, everybody has the opportunity maybe to jump onto one. And we plan on doing this moving forward on a regular basis. So our members always get a briefing when they come back. And I think it's important for not just our deployed members, but our missile field members, like those families, be also involved in these conversations and learn and understand that these struggles aren't limited to them. They're not limited to the one side or the other. I know we've got deployers and we've got missile field, and sometimes it feels kind of separated, but we're all working through the same kind of issues. They may not be exactly the same, but they're very similar.
No, and I love that. And I love that you're talking about, it kind of speaks to that, whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months, a year or longer, that reintegration process kind of happens. And I love the sentiment that both parties are responsible for making that process work. And I look forward to hearing more about some of the resources that you guys have available as we get towards the end of this conversation. Because, I as long as I've known, and I've been affiliated with the Air Force for 30 years, spouses have always been invited to the reintegration briefing, but I don't know if during the entire time I was active duty, I ever saw any show up. So it's great that we're designing a program specifically for our spouses.
And the reintegration really focuses on the members returning, not necessarily what the spouse is experiencing. So we kind of focused on that to be able to focus for them to say, hey, we get it. We get it's hard for you too. So these are some tools that we have to give to you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Shelley, would you like to add into the conversation?
Yeah, I would just say, like everybody has said, communication is key, whether that's communication while they're gone or communication when they get back. Talking about things that may be changing while they're gone, things that are happening with the kids while they're gone. Everybody wants to be a part of those conversations. Everybody wants to know what's happening. So it's not a surprise when people are coming home or people are coming back. Everybody's aware of what's happened or what's changed while they're away as well, and what the kids have done while they're away.
Yeah, so I love that. I think there's a difference between what if I'm there every day, I know I don't get all of the information, but I get most of it right firsthand. But when all you get is a phone call once a day or a couple times a week or once a week, you miss out on a lot of those details. So I love that you're stressing the importance of communication and how easy it is for that to break down, especially when people have spent time apart. Awesome. Would anybody like to add anything to that part of our conversation before we move on?
I have one quick thing to add.
Please.
Something that we often see is when folks get back, whether it's from the missile field or deployment, is alcohol use. So a lot of people use alcohol to relax. The use of alcohol is a normal and natural thing, so I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm saying just have a plan in place. So a lot of people can tend to overdo it because they probably haven't drank while they're out in the field or while they're deployed. And so it can be a good strategy to use if you have it in check, but just make sure that you have a plan beforehand and you don't have access to just an endless supply, because we see a lot of folks that tend to overdo it because it has been a while. So I think if you're going to use any sort of substance, whether it be caffeine or alcohol when you get home, again, just having that plan beforehand of what it's going to look like before you actually engage in that behavior is really important.
Yeah, moderation. I hear that word moderation popping up
Mm-hmm.
as you're talking and being responsible.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, excellent. So so thank you all for your input. Now let's talk about some strategies for how we can actually maneuver through some of those difficulties. So Captain Kilgore, you talked about grace and touched on communication, and you talked about alcohol potentially being a detractor if it's used inappropriately, and other substances. Can you start us off on this part of our conversation, talking about some skills and strategies to overcome some of the obstacles people might face?
Yeah, so skills and strategies, I think number one, knowing your resources, kind of knowing what you have available, whether you're the family member or the active duty member, or you're both active duty. I think knowing what's available. So knowing in the unit, kind of who you can reach out to if you have concerns, whether it's the shirt or the commander, key spouse, knowing who's available to you, and then also knowing the community resources. So is mental health a resource that you can reach out to? Military One Source, FAP, MFLAC, kind of knowing who you have in your corner, and having those resources kind of preloaded before you need them. And that way, just in case you need to reach out to an agency, you kind of have a list of who does what and who to rely on. I think that's super important to have, again, before you need it. And even if you need it, it doesn't mean that something is terribly wrong. Everybody needs a little adjustment or a little support, and it doesn't really matter where it comes from. So I think seeking support and normalizing that everybody needs support in some way during a time of reunification or transition.
Yeah, love that. Get some, get support when you need it, and that you're not alone. And I've heard that before a couple of times already, right? Like, this is a normal process. So when things feel clunky, just the realization that most people that are reuniting are going through something similar. I think there's comfort in that.
Mhm.
Excellent. Alicia, is there anything you'd like to add to this part of our conversation where we're talking about strategies for overcoming some of those obstacles folks might run into during reintegration?
I think one of the biggest things is to be patient. It's not going to be a change of command. It's not going to just happen overnight. It's going to take some time. And whether that's a couple of days or a couple of months, if you need some extra support to get through that, that's what we're all here for. So I think understanding that it's a process, not an appointment. It's not like, oh, members home, families back together, everything's going to be normal, and it's not. So it takes time, and I think remembering too that everybody's reaction is going to be a little different. So, some kids shy away and like don't want anything to do with the member, and some come overly attached and don't want to leave their side. And then we have to remember our spouses have been doing this by themselves, right? They've been holding down the fort, so to speak, and the member's been working a lot of hours. So they need time to unwind. Everybody's personal time has changed. So just being patient with each other and remembering it is a process. It takes time.
Yeah, I love that. The talk about the process, being patient. It's funny because I call back to Captain Kilgore talking about the difference between rapport and report. I automatically thought, who's going to struggle with the patience and the process part of that? And those are the report givers, right? You asked me for something, I gave you something, we can move forward. We check that box, we can move on. And it doesn't necessarily work that way, and it does take time and patience. So thank you for that. Chaplain Harris, you want to join into this part of the conversation where we're talking about strategies?
Sure. We've hinted at, and we've even talked about communication. Just wanted to remind us all that when we think of communication generally, we think of talking, but the most important part of communication is listening. And so whether you're a redeployer or whether you're a family member receiving that person back, the power of listening is really powerful. And being full of empathy as we listen, and being present to that person, that is what makes communication really powerful. And so would want to remind our community of that for sure, is to be great listeners in this time.
Yeah, listening. It's so funny because you and I attended a course back in November where it was strictly about listening. And you as a chaplain, myself, I spent 22 years as a mental health tech, active duty. I'm a great listener, and I learned, I fail at listening all the time. So it's not a skill that you can learn and you just get automatically. And then tying it in with the empathy, right? I really appreciate that. And that's what the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see the world from their viewpoint, or attempt to do that. It's not an easy task. And especially when you're talking about somebody that you significant to you, and you've known them for so long, and they come back and things are just a little bit different, that empathy can be very
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Amanda, Could you give us some insight into maybe some of the things that you experienced during your reintegration?
I would like to piggyback off of what Alicia and what Captain Kilgore said with having patience and knowing your resources. Kind of what Alicia was talking about with kind of the kids. If you have kids and you're coming back to you, or your spouse is coming back to you, having patience also with your children, because a lot of times spouse is coming back, and the spouse that's been here for months waiting for them to come back has been doing everything, and yes, they got it, but they also, I think some spouses expect a break as soon as they come back, and they're like, just help me. But the children are also kind of like, well, mom's been here, and I know I'm used to asking mom for a snack, and I don't want to ask dad for a snack, and like, but he's right there, and those types of things. So having patience with your children as well as your spouse, and then knowing your resources. I know for a lot of spouses, they probably wouldn't be super comfortable reaching out to the shirt or any of their spouse's chain of command. So for me as a key spouse, I would just like to say, hey, we're here, and we have those resources available for you too. We can give you those numbers to call if you don't know. We can put you in touch with the shirt if we can't help you. So knowing that the key spouse is there to really help the spouse is something that I wish a lot more spouses were aware of.
No, that's a great message, right? And I love that you brought the kids into the conversation, because they can get lost in the mix really easily, right? And absolutely, key spouses are integral to making this work. And I think a lot of times from a spouse's perspective, you think, I don't want to reach out to the first sergeant because I don't want to get, my husband or wife in trouble at work, even though you're really reaching out for help. Key spouses are an excellent resource to get plugged in. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Awesome. Shelley, Ms. Carbo, would you like to add something to some of the difficulties and pitfalls that folks might encounter when their spouse returns or significant other?
Yeah, no, everybody pretty much touched on everything. The communication difficulties, the struggles, the fights, just knowing that it may happen, but just knowing who you can reach out to, and that it's okay to take that space and that time away and let each other know that you need to walk away during those difficult times. Having that safe space if you are finding yourself frustrated.
Yeah, that's one of my two favorite words, space and grace, right? So knowing to take the time to take a time out, and that it's okay to walk away for a few minutes, as long as you're not walking away for a week, right? But no, it's great. Space and grace and communication, awesome. So transitioning on from that, let's talk to our audience about some of the resources that we have available for our airmen and their families. Ms. Carbo, Shelley, I'm going to let you take the lead and talk about some of the services that Family Advocacy provides for our reintegrating families.
Definitely, yeah. If families need any help with like parenting or communication, learning about each other during this time of change, we offer like prep, learning each other's love languages that may have changed, learning each other's personality styles, couples communication, couples counseling. Those are all available, as well as our domestic abuse victim advocate. If things do unfortunately go in a bad direction, we do have individuals that they can reach out to for support as well.
Awesome. Chaplain Harris.
So I love Dr. Kilgore's categories of rapport and report. So I'll use that for what the Chaplain Corps offers in terms of rapport. Of course, 100% privileged, confidential counseling for individuals, for couples, for families. Faith is an important part of a lot of families' lives, and so we can help guide and listen and speak into that. But also on the report side, we offer a lot of different events, marriage date nights, marriage retreats, family retreats. We hold Financial Peace University seminars and retreats. So a lot of different events to help pass on some skills to our members. And that's hosted by both the 5th Bomb Wing Chaplain Corps and our True North teams spread out across the installation.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Kilgore, would you like to talk about some of the programs mental health has to offer, and ADAPT as well?
Yes. So mental health and ADAPT, we generally only serve active duty. So we are able to do a lot with the active duty member that may involve the couple and the family, but we're actually seeing the active duty member. And if folks want couples therapy or more family intervention, we can definitely provide those resources. And we work heavily with FAP to be able to see if it's something we can refer to FAP, chaplain, or something we need to refer downtown. Military One Source is a really wonderful program that anybody can engage in. You can just Google it and find out how to get connected. We have folks in the community that are providers for Military One Source, and that stays out of your military record. It's confidential, and we don't have much to do with that. So if folks want to keep things private and separate, we tend to refer to them. But in terms of active duty intervention, we're happy to provide anything that an active duty member might need at the mental health clinic. If you're unsure of what you might need, if you want a resource downtown or in the clinic, you can always give us a call, and we're happy to provide those resources.
Awesome. Amanda, you had talked about the Key Spouse Network. Could you touch on that real quickly in terms of what it is for as a resource for our family members?
Sure. So basically, within majority of the squadrons that I've seen, they all have Key Spouse programs, and what we're here for is we're there to take care of your spouses, whether you're deployed or not. We're here to take care of you, and they can reach out to us. And basically, we're a funnel of resources so that we can, if you are struggling, we can give you the number for mental health. We can send you to family advocacy. We can give you those resources and send you where you need to go. We ourselves are not counselors. So we cannot be that person for you, but we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I love that. And even though you're not necessarily experts in
Right.
terms of mental health or being a chaplain or a social worker or a psychologist, that network and being able to connect people, and I've seen it at work numerous times, I think that's so beneficial for our community members.
Yeah, and to just be a person of support for that has a person that's probably gone through what you're going through.
Yeah, that's powerful.
To give that level of comfort for other spouses.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Thompson, Alicia, could you tell us a little bit more about the reintegration stuff from Airmen and Family Readiness Center?
So during the members reintegration and now with the spouses reintegration briefing, we do touch on all of the programs that everybody has already talked about. In addition, we go over the military family life consultants. They are available. They are also an anonymous source in the sense that they don't take records. They don't, it doesn't affect PRP status. So, and they're here to help individuals, so the spouse or the couple. We have a child and youth MFLAC that's here to work with the kids if they need something. So, and they are doing those via teleconference kind of situation now to make sure we're maintaining physical distancing because we want to make sure everybody's remaining safe. But we also we talk about the Military and Veterans Crisis Line. So that's available 24 hours a day. They have a chat option, they have a text option, and they do serve family members. So they don't just serve a veteran and the active duty military folks. They will talk to folks that are not, our spouses and their families as well. So we also include SARC. SARC usually briefs a little bit for us because that is a concern. Obviously, we wish it wasn't, but it is still out there. And we also encourage them to talk to leadership, the key spouses like Amanda, and the first sergeants, because those guys are a great resource for our families too.
Excellent. And so what I heard you say earlier, and I just want to come back to it because I think this is super important, is that we're going to be offering, or you guys are going to be offering a spouses reintegration briefing virtually initially. But I think that's awesome. That's wonderful that we're targeting that part of the family unit maybe a little bit differently than we've done in the past. So thanks to you and the Airmen and Family Readiness crew for making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Does anybody have any alibis, anything that popped up as we were talking that they'd like to circle back to before we wrap up this podcast? Well, I do. So as we were talking, it occurred to me that we have a civilian population that actually deploys, and I don't want them to be left out of this part of our conversation. I won't talk about difficulties. I think those are universal, and strategies are universal. But in terms of resources, just remembering that as a civilian employee, we have an employee assistance program that's available. And if you are looking for services from our employee assistance program, please reach out to me. Last name is Jaworski. There's only 3 of us on the global, and I'm the only male. So reach out to me and I will connect you with those services or our civilian personnel office. Okay. So before we wrap up officially, a big thank you to our panel members. Thank you all for being here today and providing great information for our community. And Team Minot, thank you for your time today. I'm sure that we have some questions in our community. So as a reminder, please submit any questions that you have for our helping agencies via the Team Minot app on your mobile device. Just click on the Helping Agency Q&A link. We look forward to answering your questions during next week's podcast. Stay safe, practice appropriate social distancing. Please remember that you matter and stay Minot strong.